Good evening and welcome to the Scarborough Board of Education regular business meeting. The date is Thursday, April 27th, 2023. Diane, can we call the attendance, please?
Sure. Mrs. Gammon,
Here.
Mr. Kelleher,
Here.
Ms. Leong,
Here.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Here.
Mr. Mayorino,
Here.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Here.
Mr. Peony Huff. Here. Ms. Bertulia, and Mr. Shumway.
Great, thank you. Would everyone please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Agenda item 4.0 is adjustments to the agenda. Are there any adjustments? this
No
evening?
adjustments this evening.
All right, agenda item 5.0 is public comment. If there's anybody wishing to make public comment, if you can line up by the podium and we'll go one at a time, or if you're online, if you could raise your yellow Zoom hand, we can invite you to give public comment as well. All right, so really quickly, while you're getting set up, I'll just go over the rules for public comment. Public comment is addressed to me as the board chair. You could keep your comment to 3 minutes. And prior to getting started, if you could introduce yourself to us, and then we will recognize you to start your comment.
Hello,
Hi, what's your name?
my name is Suno.
Very good.
My pronouns are he, him. I'm here to support trans and LGBTQ kids. I believe that all kids should have a wonderful future. Every kid should feel free in our community. They might be scared to come out, so let's be their diamond shields. Tell them they are unstoppable and unbreakable. Now let's hear what my mom has to say. I'll put them over your head.
Thank you. I was very, very strictly directed as to how I was supposed to hold those signs. All right. Do I get a new 3 minutes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Michelle Oksu-Shup. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a teacher, parent, and resident in Scarborough. The views I express today do not represent the views of my school district, but rather they are reflections of my own as a cis queer woman born of a Korean immigrant mother and father of Middle Eastern ancestry. I am humbled to stand on the unceded ancestral lands of the Wabanaki people. I have heard people say things like, I respect you and I love you, but I will not protect you. This is fundamentally flawed. James Baldwin, one of the greatest American thinkers, said, we can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist. As a teacher, how can I say I love and respect my students if I don't champion their human rights? As a parent, how can I say I love and respect my children if I don't honor their voices? As a human, how can I say I love and respect my community if I deny their right to exist? I am grateful every day for the educators each of my children has had in the Scarborough school system. Like Miss Daigle. Daily, they support, nourish, and lift up my children. Each of my children had a supportive and caring teacher with whom to navigate the waters of sharing their identity on their terms. In fact, each of their teachers at the time of their sharing their identities, fifth grade, and second grade respectively, were their biggest cheerleaders and loving spaces. Not only were their teachers their supports, but their principals were as well. That is how we support kids. School board, we need to be their shields. We must protect their personal autonomy. We must protect their voices. We must protect their right to choose when and with whom they share who they are. Parents, we need to protect their rights. Our children's bodies and spirits are theirs and theirs alone. We need to be their #1 accomplice and safe haven. I will end with another truth from James Baldwin. I hope we remember this as we advocate for our children, as we show them who we are and what we stand for. Children have never been very good at listening to their elders, but they have never failed to imitate them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi. You could introduce yourself and then we'll start the.
Hi, my name is Mike Blanton. And I'm a Scarborough High School student, a sophomore.
Okay, welcome. Go ahead and start your time. You'll see the light on top.
As a non-binary student, I support the proposed student policy because it is necessary for the safety of transgender students throughout Scarborough High School. I have friends whose families wouldn't be supportive of their identity as a trans student, and they deserve to have a place where they can safely be who they are without worrying about being outed to their parents or kicked out. If a trans kid hasn't come out to their parents, it's not because the teachers are hiding it from them. It's because they don't feel comfortable with talking to their parents, and that isn't a teacher's fault. All transgender students deserve just as much respect as any cisgender student, and I believe that this policy is a move in the right direction.
Hello. Can I
Hi,
start?
can you just introduce yourself?
Okay.
please?
My name is Angela Maliakil. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a junior at Scarborough High School, and I'm also the vice president of Civil Rights Club. And I support this new policy that makes it so that trans students can be more comfortable in sharing their experiences at school. Trans students should not feel endangered at school as a result of sharing their identity, because school should be a place where everybody should feel welcomed. Being surrounded by many of my non-gender confirming friends and classmates has made me more aware of their experiences and what they face in their day-to-day lives. These experiences are another reason why I support this policy, and they deserve to feel like every other student, regardless of their gender. They deserve to feel like everyone else. They deserve to feel comfortable in who they are. They deserve to feel safe. For some non-gender confirming students, school may be their only place of safety. They might have hostile homes, so school is the only safe place. Regardless of these, students are humans first. And as such, their rights should be protected. And this is why I support this policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Yashu Dersala, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a sophomore at Scarborough High School. The passing of this policy is absolutely necessary. Why should trans students be excluded from the protection that school provides? School is supposed to be a place where everyone feels safe, and excluding my trans friends and peers from feeling safe is discriminatory. Trans and non-gender conforming students are my closest friends and peers. They are my people. They are beautiful human beings who have so much to give to the world, and the least we can do is give them a space where they feel safe and protected. This new policy is absolutely necessary because it protects trans students by changing verbs to make them more definitive, erasing any confusion that could result in actions that could potentially harm these students. For many students who don't have a safe space at home, school should at least be a place where they feel like they belong and can express themselves and their identity. They deserve to feel secure, safe, and respected in our community, just like every other student. This is why I support this policy, and I hope you can understand, at the end of the day, these students are also human. Thank you.
My name is Alex Wu. I am a sophomore at Scarborough High School. I use any pronouns. Many parents feel that the school board is setting policies that circumvent parents. School board policy was never what affected relationships between parents and children. School board policy was never attached to how parents interacted with their children. School board policy does not affect the comfort of a student to speak of their truest self to their parents. If they censor themselves, it is because of what parents have done. If they censor themselves, it is because of how parents have made them feel. If they censor themselves, it is because they feel they cannot be their truest self with their parents. Forcing them to speak their truth where they feel they are not welcome will not remove a wedge between parents and teachers. It merely endangers children For if that child never felt welcome enough to be able to speak about our identity, it was not a problem of school board policy. It was a problem of trust and control. It was a problem of parents' control. The policy protects trans students from being outed, somebody telling somebody else about a certain person's identity against their will in regards to gender or sexuality, if they share their identity at school. It does this by moving verbs in the subjunctive mood, verbs that indicate possibility, into the indicative. Indicative verbs indicate facts, statements, or in the case of this policy, things that will occur under it. The protection of trans students in this policy is vital, as there are many households in which a trans student will not be welcome if they openly share their identity. They could even possibly be disowned or kicked out of their home. If a child feels more welcome to speak about their identity in a school environment, one that should be more unfamiliar than a space of family, it is clear that the space of family was never a truly welcome one. If there is no space for secrets, then it is clear that honesty and trust was never the intention of a teacher-parent relationship. The whole idea of needing trust and honesty is contradictory, for if a parent needs verification and identification of all honesty, of the true, full identity of their child, then there was never any trust. Allow us to formulate our own identities on our own time, without whatever idea of trust or honesty thereof, without whatever idea of control over our identity they want. We have the right to be ourselves, our own true selves. We gathered here to show our support. We gathered that without effective policy, our rights are not protected. We gather here as a tribute to you, a testament to our opinion. So many people here are here in support of passing this policy, the amendment of this policy. We are statistics enough to show that people care about this policy. People care about the rights of our students. Please make it so trans students can be safe in their identity at our school. Trans students deserve to feel safe. Our students deserve to feel safe in who they are.
Shall I start?
If you just introduce yourself. first.
Hi, my name is Kate Marvin. I am a mother of a student at Scarborough Middle School. I am an English professor, and I don't know how else. I come here as a mother. I obviously support this policy. I want to give you some insight as to what it's like to be a parent of a trans non-binary kid. My kid is a straight A student. They have a pet frog named Gremlin. They're really obsessed with cats, and they draw a lot. You know, they're hardly like a deviant, right? In fact, one time I parked somewhere in a no parking zone to walk our dog really quickly, and they wouldn't get out of the car because they were like, no. So really, like, it's, you know, so my kid is also trans. Now, they came out a few years ago, and I didn't anticipate it. I knew that they might be queer, but I hadn't anticipated the transness, and but they were ready. They had already been thinking about it for a long time, and they hadn't shared it with me. And I can be honest with you, as a cishet parent, it was hard for me to get used to, and I had to do a lot of thinking, and I had to do a lot of listening to my child. But what I noticed almost right away was that my child was much happier. My child was liberated. Okay, they had suffered a brief period of anxiety and depression, which was really unusual for them because they're very focused, you know, and they're very intelligent, and they have a lot of joy in life. And so I was worried that I didn't know what it was, but it turned out it was gender dysphoria that had really been bothering them for a long time. So once I saw how uplifted they were, I really didn't care. And then I started to think about, well, why does anybody care that, like, my kid is maybe not male or female, is maybe somewhere on the spectrum, because it really doesn't affect them. I can tell you that my child does feel safe sometimes in the schools and sometimes not safe. I can tell you my kid largely feels safe because of the support from their friends and their parents and their friends and their teachers and me. But what I want to tell you, in addition to that, just sort of to share my experience, because it's been a really rewarding experience to have a trans child who's come out and stood up for themselves. And it really, I'm very like, I have a lot of respect for their bravery, honestly. But I also want to tell you, they have a lot of friends, and they have friends who have not come out to their parents. And I'm like, well, like, why not? They're like, they're not comfortable. I think some of them might even have parents who might be ready for it, but I don't think the kids are ready. And so that's why I feel very strongly about this policy, because I think kids should come out when they're ready to do it to their parents. Thanks a lot.
Right, is there anybody else wishing to make public comment either in person or again online? If you could raise your yellow Zoom hand. All right, seeing no more, I will close public comment for the evening. Thank you. Agenda item 6.0 is the Spotlight Award recognition. So Jillian?
All right, we have I say this every time because it's always unique, but we have a unique award tonight. I'm very excited to present. We have 3 winners tonight and they are on the next slide. Oh, look at it, it's all shifted off to the side. Katrina Edwards, Sybil Kippen, Cheryl Milliken, and they are all in the audience. And the person that nominated them is also in the audience, and that is Stephanie Lenhart. And Stephanie, do you want to, okay. So Stephanie put together this really phenomenal presentation that I cannot take credit for at all. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't. So I'll just read it. Katrina, Sybil, and Cheryl are being celebrated for their amazing work that went above and beyond and to help a new student transition to Wentworth last year. So when this 3rd grade student moved to Scarborough in the fall of 22, she had severe adverse reaction to school and school buildings. So when the team got together, that was led by Katrina and Sybil and Cheryl. I was going to try to say your full last name and I realized I didn't want to mess that up. But, immediately, they created a plan to work to make school accessible for her. And they have come along, the child has come a long way. They've been working on the playground where the special ed team worked outside with her for 3 hours a day, which that's a lot. You guys are awesome. But when it got cold outside, they realized their playground wasn't going to be sustainable. So they created an indoor playground and the student learned to transition inside. And so as time passed, she became more comfortable with their indoor playground area. And the team incorporated ways for her to explore more parts of the school building. She started taking the long way to her room, passing by the FLS classroom on the way. That's the functional life skills classroom, correct? All right. That led to stops in the FLS room and the therapy rooms where she was exposed to her peers and other special ed team members for a brief period of time. So for the 2022-23 school year, this team of amazing educators and therapists were able to transition the student from spending 3 hours a day outside on the playground to attending a full day of school in the functional life skills classroom. So fast forward to this year, and the student continues to attend full day in the FLS room. She eats lunch in the cafeteria and goes to recess with her peers. Sorry, this is a beautiful story and it's very touching. So she uses the communication system and iPad to communicate her wants and needs. 2 weeks ago, she rode the bus for the first time and participated in the FLS recreational swim program run by the team of OTs and PTs. And this dedicated trio of special educators along with the special ed team put so much time and thought into the successful plan to integrate the student into her school environment. It took a long time and there was definitely a lot of bumps in the road, but Katrina, Sybil, and Cheryl never gave up and saw the plan through to succession. But there was a video and it's not here. I don't know what happened, but it was a really, really nice video that was by the principal of Wentworth, who is not in the room. Oh, she is in the room. And so do you want to come and? Well, Kelly had a really beautiful message and it was very touching. bummed that, okay,
Yeah, and I
please
was
do.
gonna say, we can also add it after the fact to the slide deck so that it'll be
Yeah.
up as part of the materials as well.
And so I can speak personally. I know that these ladies are amazing educators and we're very lucky to have them. So congratulations and thank you for all that you do. And we have some awards for you if you'll come up and you're welcome to speak if you want to, but you don't have to. Okay.
Are there any comments about the Spotlight Award?
Can I just point out the smile in the little girl's face at the end? Like, I think that spoke volumes and I've never met her and never heard the story before. So I think that's awesome.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Sorry I can't be there, but I wanted to say congratulations. I think this was very well deserved. After seeing those slides, I thought, what a wonderful, beautiful story. And you almost never hear of how much work a special education teacher does for one individual child. And it means a lot to me just because I'm also a special ed teacher. So for you guys to be recognized in this way and having other staff recognize how hard you've worked to really integrate this child into the building, that takes a lot of work, and it's so commendable. So congratulations to you three.
Thank you, Jenna. I will also echo the congratulations. Congratulations. And it's to Brian's point, the photos of her swimming and in the pool and so excited and so happy and directly attributable to the work you've done, right? And it was long and it was hard, but you stuck with it and you stuck together. And that's really, really admirable. And we all very much appreciate all of the hard work. And how cool that your coworkers recognize it as well, right? And so that must feel pretty special too. So thank you. And thank you, Stephanie, for nominating her. And Kelly, we will absolutely get your video up on the slide deck. So thank you for that too. All right. All right, agenda item 7.0 is the public hearing in the FY24 school budget. So for this, I will ask Kate to come to the podium.
Throw some things.
Yeah.
Let our friends escape. Oh, that's okay. I'd go. Run while you can. So Jeff will tell you that I had like, I don't know, 15 slides in there this morning and we went, oh my gosh, look at the agenda. That's so silly. You guys don't need to hear the budget story again. So we got creative and put together a lot of links so that when the public is looking at this, if this is your first time hearing about the school's budget this year, you really want to get in there and poke around in the slide deck and find all the links to all the materials that we have available for you. But for this evening, I'm just giving a quick overview that will allow the public to speak to the budget for anybody who's present to do so. So the first reading of the school's budget was passed by the school board on March 16th, and we've got the slide deck from that meeting linked in here. The full municipal budget was presented to the town council and the public on March 29th. And now we're in the process between first and second reading where we're reviewing the budget, both town and school leaders, and coming up with refinements and updates as we move toward the board second reading and then finally to the town council second reading and vote. Our budget resources are all available on the school department's budget page. This is a live link in the slide deck. And if you don't have the slide deck in front of you, you can just go to the school department's website and go under the school board section and find the budget page. On that page are a ton of resources available for you to learn about the budget. Everything from the superintendent's introduction and executive summary, which is a quick overview, to full deep piles of digital paper, I guess we could call it. Carolyn and I are like, yes, paper. Slide decks from our workshops, an FAQ sheet is the last thing on that little checklist, and that's something that we're updating and working with as questions come in. So I will say if anyone in the public does have questions, they should send them to boe@scarboroughschools.org. And those will be parceled out to the right folks to answer them. And then we can add them to our FAQs so they're available for everybody to look at. This is the way that the budget looked when the school board received it from the Leadership Council on March 16th. This is a summary of the budget showing the three operating funds, the general fund, which is your K-12 education that the public votes on, adult education, and school nutrition. And at that time, we were looking at an overall increase to our gross budget, our expenditures budget of 6.47%, and an increase to the ask of the town, the tax request for townspeople of 7.28%. Since that time, we've had some really great news. The first bullet point on this slide is that as we were heading into the town manager's presentation on March 29th, we received word from the Department of Education that our state subsidy was going to be increased by over $1.5 million. And that was just huge in terms of our ask to Scarborough taxpayers, because it allowed us to have the same budget with a much smaller request for taxes. Also, in the meantime, since we've had first reading, we've had a number of things change in our knowledge about what's in the budget. One of the big ones was that we received our Anthem premium rates. We had estimated them at 8% increase, and we actually are going to have a 3.7% increase, which is great. That's a much smaller amount than what we had budgeted for. So you see in the slide that we're going to save money over what we originally asked for. So when we come to second reading, you'll see a reduction. You'll also see reductions in debt service. You'll see some increases in facilities insurance, that's property insurance and contracted services projections, because we've got better numbers for those. And unfortunately, those better numbers are higher. But again, we're trying to adjust to the new information that's coming in. And energy, even fuel costs, we're also going to be able to have some reductions. So we have a long spreadsheet that we follow and track all of these changes, and that's provided to the board before they go to the second reading so that they can see all of the adjustments that have been made. We kind of previewed the draft of that with the finance committee this week, just to give them a sense of where we are today. And this next slide is actually where we are today. You can see that the total education budget that you saw 2 slides ago, the expenditures are now down to a 5.86% increase. And the tax request is now down below 4% to 3.58%. So that's really great news in terms of the lift that we're asking the community to make to support the school budget. And we're, super pleased to be in this position. And again, we'll be continuing to make adjustments all the way up through the second reading of the school board. Here's some dates to take note of. We'd be especially pleased for the public to turn out for the town council's first reading next week. School supporters will be most welcome at that meeting. We'll be talking with the town council on a number of topics, one being the building project, which is the next topic, I think, on our agenda tonight. And showing up at some of these meetings and weighing in and asking questions and voicing opinions is really important throughout the whole process. The last item on the page is about the referendum vote. And the vote is kind of late this year. It's after school is out. So we're encouraging our school community to take advantage of the fact that they can use absentee ballots and they can take advantage of early voting. So you can request an absentee ballot right now. And again, that's a live link. It's to the town's elections page. You can call the town clerk's office and they will send you out a ballot that you can hang on to and turn in tonight if you want to. I think there's one more. And it's just another plea for folks to stay connected with us. We have our own, as I said, our own school department budget page, which goes pretty deep on the school side of things. The town also has a school budget portal, which includes the entire municipal budget and a lot of documentation that goes along with that. There's some videos, there's some articles that are very interesting there. So I would definitely encourage folks to take a look at that as well.
Thank you so much, Kate. Did you have
I was going to say, for the record, that's down from 15 slides to 5, right?
I don't know if I can claim I had,
Pretty
I
good.
think I had, one of them was like the cover page and, but yeah, I think that's probably the briefest I've been in quite some time. So I'll take credit for that.
Are there any questions for Kate? This might be a sillier question, but I just wondered if you can explain, when you look at, Diane, for you, if you look at slide 19, which is the original projections, what we saw at first reading, and then you look at the new slide on slide 21, the difference in the tax request is greater than the difference between the total education budget. And so is that a result of that? I understand like the changes that have happened, but the change from the total education budget went from 6.47 to 5.86, but the tax request went from 7.28 down to 3.58. So that's a pretty significant difference.
Right.
Could you
So
just explain that quickly?
So what you're seeing there is the impact of that new revenue, right? So that above that red line is all of the expenditure budget where we have been making adjustments and bringing things down from the original ask. But what really impacts that is the non-tax revenue. And the non-tax revenue is what allows us to reduce our requests for local taxes. And we all know that Scarborough pays most of the bills for the school budget. It's just the nature of our community and our ability, according to the Department of Education, to pay those bills. But the difference in the tax ask, the tax request, is driven mostly by that additional revenue.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any other questions for Kate? All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, agenda item 8.0 is the Scarborough Public School Building Project, the site selection. So for this, I will invite Dana, our Building Steering Committee Chair, to the podium.
Good evening, Dana Fortier. Hopefully I don't get just 3 minutes. I'm Dana Fortier. I'm as Shannon mentioned, I'm the chair of the building committee. And I think tonight what we wanted to talk a little bit about is the site selection process for the school. First of all, I would be remiss if I didn't thank all the people that were involved, and I won't be able to go through all of them, but there's a number of people in this room. All of the building committee has put a tremendous amount of work into it. Al Palmer, Lisa Sawin, from Al from Gore Palmer, and Lisa from Harriman. So it's really pretty extensive effort, including a lot of the town staff as well. So tonight, I won't go through everything because I want to be cognizant of time, but I wanted to cover a little bit about the process, some of what we looked at, and where we ended up. So Diane, if you want to go to the next slide. I've always thought that this would make a pretty quilt, but so this is a map of Scarborough and the parcels that fall between a certain acreage. And this was sort of the basis for us starting our search. So we didn't relegate ourselves through the search process to parcels that were just on the market or available. We looked at everything. including ones that were not on the market. Parcels that may be smaller in size, but could be combined to make a larger parcel. Our target acreage was somewhere around 25 acres. We looked at smaller, we looked at bigger, everything was really considered. So interesting thing, or maybe not so interesting to some people who've lived in Scarborough, is there's a lot of green on this map, and the green is conserved area. What doesn't show on this map is all the parcels that are in blue or pink are parcels that are either land that's owned or could be developed. But in many cases, what you'll find is that not all that land is developable. Scarborough has a lot of wetlands, and we found a lot of parcels that were 25 acres, but were 60% wetland. And so when you look at that, and you look at how much land is already developed in Scarborough, it starts to shrink down your bucket of possibilities pretty quickly. So if you want to jump to the next slide. This shows our search area. There were, through some different venues, community input from building committee, from school staff, from town staff, from a number of different people. We were able to get to what we felt like was a reasonable search area, trying to balance bus transportation times, the radius from the municipal campus, which is important for offering services, and also, not having doubling back of buses was important. And lastly, not necessarily last, but one of the other critical components was the sense of approach. Scarborough does have some industrial areas that had large parcels, and we didn't want students or families to feel like they were coming into an industrial park on their way to school. So that was an important aspect of the search. So you can kind of see the area there on the screen, with the stars being schools and the municipal complex and high school right in the middle. And if you jump to the next slide. These are 10 areas that were looked at. These are not necessarily all of them, but these were the ones that boiled to the top from two different groups. One of them was from the building committee on the right, and the other one was from community forums that we had. And you can see the top four are matching pretty closely. So not necessarily in the same order, but the same top four. So safety, environment, location for future expansion, and traffic and transportation safety were all important. Particularly when you look at the congestion around the Oak Hill area, there's a lot there to consider that was important in the decision-making process. So again, these others, the other 10, you don't have to go back, Diane. The other 10, those were still used in the ranking, but we wanted to highlight those top four just from an alignment perspective. So a little bit, I've already talked about some of this, 3 to 4 miles, 1.5 miles, bus ride times, proximity, all very important aspects for the site selection process. You can go ahead. So we asked people to rank where they would like to see. We gave them a grid, and you notice that it's a little hard to see, but a gridded map. We did this in sort of a real-time session. We said, hey, if we're going to put a school anywhere in Scarborough, where would you like to see it? And 73% of the people that participated told us they wanted to see it in square D2. Some of them said, hey, maybe C2. And then we had a small percentage of people that said they wanted to see it in E9. You'll notice that there's a lot of green there. That's conservation land. Not going to be real great. So we proceeded. The next slide, if you go. And I think this goes to talk a little bit about the rigor of the process. And that's one of the things that I think for anybody that has doubts around what was considered or the number of people that were involved. We had 30 plus site selection meetings between public forums, meetings with the town, school board, building committee. And that's not to say, the meetings that Al and I had to talk about, one site or another and the topography. There was a lot that went into this. We had 46 sites initially identified. over 2,000 acres of land that were explored. We narrowed it down to a number that was less than 46, but still greater than the 4 on the next line over a long period of time. This has been going on for a number of months. And we ultimately came down to 4 sites that align closest to the site selection criteria. As we'll see in the next slides here, we removed 3 of them due to alignment, lack of alignment with the criteria, and then ultimately boiled it down to the 1. So many months of work summarized in 1 single slide. This matrix and the following following slides show all of the sites that were considered and provides information on the parcels, why they were removed from the list, or in some cases why they were brought on for further consideration. And so for anybody that wants to go through, this is all the due diligence, and there's more information beyond this if for anybody that's interested in some bedtime reading. So you can jump to the next slide. So the 4 sites that we ultimately ended up with were site number 7, which is for anybody that's familiar with where the Scarborough Hannaford is, it's directly behind Hannaford, owned by the Foley family. The Scarborough Downs location, which is, everybody I think is familiar with the Downs property. It's 500 acres of development. There's another site that's kind of out behind Cabela's on Two Rod Road. It is on the west side of the turnpike or the north side of the turnpike, depending on which way you look at it. And another site that is a little behind, I guess, where Sam's Club is, again, on the other side of the turnpike, that is owned by the Grondin family, members of the Grondin family. So those were the 4 finalist sites. The Grondin site was a late ad. It came in, it was under option with another company for a period of time. That option was released. Once that option was released, it very quickly went back under option with a local developer. The local developer, we had discussion with them, and they had indicated their willingness to carve out a portion of the site potentially for the project. And I'll talk more about that here in a minute. So the Foley site, again, 35 acres. I think the next slide. So this, all of these images on the following slides are kind of at the same scale, so you can get an idea of the size of the parcels. You'll see the area to the top of the page. You'll see a lot of blue hashing. Those are wetland areas. There are some wetland areas on the property itself, and as we explored this site, there's a couple things that came into play. One is that we couldn't contact the family. We had a difficult time getting a response from the people that own the property. And there are some challenges with access on this one. So Little Dolphin Drive, which is a road that enters the property through a small driveway, so actually you have access through that, and then another access would have to be carved out largely across the wetland area that is to the top of the page there. So that would require some in lieu compensation, which is, for wetlands, which is, I think, Al's 525,000, 285 an acre, $285,000 an acre to mitigate, plus cost of construction, which is a pretty hefty cost for this. So this site, it was still in consideration, but there were definitely some pretty substantial challenges. In addition to that, any road that would come from the top of the page over to Route 114 would already be in a very congested area of Oak Hill. Oak Hill is considered a high crash location, again, with a lot of traffic. So we would have to, DOT would require likely some mitigation and some improvements in order for us to have a drive there. So this is the Scarborough Downs. We had been in conversations with them, and talking about a 25-acre parcel somewhere on the down site. And this site had a number of advantages. One of them was that, it's already in development. A lot of the traffic mitigation has been completed or is already underway, which is a big, to say all of it would be complete, it probably isn't accurate. There probably are some things that will still have to be done. But by and large, that's there's a multi entrance ability here. So you have, access off of Payne Road, you have access off of Route 1, soon to be access off of Higas Parkway, and the potential for future access off of Sawyer Road around between the middle school and where the old racetrack is. Utilities are largely in place with some, work needed for utilities. And it did meet all of our local criteria just in terms of entrance and soils and topography. The sites are relatively flat. That entire, development is largely a flat field. So lots of positives with this one. The Two Rod Road site, again, this site is on the northwest side of the turnpike. You can jump to the next one. As you can see, there's a large wetland complex there right in the middle, and there's another one on the corner. That is unfortunately, it sort of bifurcates the parcels. So you're left with a developable area that's, sort of at the bottom and one on the top. This site does have some grade to it. So there is a sufficient base for the programming needs. It would have to be on one corner or the other. However, some of the challenges are utilities. With this being on the other side of the turnpike, there would be no sewer and no water. So those utilities would have to be installed, which is, basically involves tunneling under the turnpike. The turnpike does not allow overhead or bridge crossings. So we would have to, bore under the turnpike for both of those utility services at relatively high expense. I guess lastly, for this property, there is a restriction on Two Rod Road for vehicular traffic and entrances. That's actually a town ordinance. Not a deal killer, but it would be something that would have to be it would have to be undone by the council. And likely there would be some traffic transportation improvements needed to both Two Rod Road and some of the other subsequent road along that corridor. The other, at the top of the page, you'll see sort of a soil area at the very top. That is a junkyard and something that was also part of our decision making. If we were not able to deal with the Two Rod Road, issue, we would have to somehow find an entrance off of Beach Ridge Road, which would bring us closer potentially to that junkyard area. And there was also concerns around, potential for expansion of that and potential concerns around soil contamination. So lastly, is the Grondin site. This is a site that I talked about that was a late ad. We were made aware of this when the Grondins approached us and had indicated that the property may be available. This site is a very interesting one. It's a large site. And as you'll notice there where the cursor is there again is some very large wetland complex. Is part of the Red Brook Stream corridor. So it's also, in addition to it being a wetland, it's also a stream system that is maybe a little bit more highly protected by the state. Access to this parcel would have to be off of 114. The areas that were considered for placement of the school are sort of in the notched area right where the cursor is right there. And would require, obviously an entrance in off of 114, bringing it up to the school area there, and that would require, again, wetland mitigation in order to accommodate the road. 114, that section of 114 from the Sam's Club intersection or Payne Road intersection on up through into Gorham is considered by the DOT as a traffic mobility corridor. So entrances off of that road of any volume other than of like a driveway, so anything more than just a home driveway would require special permission from the DOT. And there's an exception process that would have to go through. It would be highly likely for an entrance of this magnitude would require an intersection, potentially a stoplight. And where the road would be located is in a curve. So there were concerns around sight distance for entrance. With regard to placement of the building itself in the area that we looked at, and we did look at a couple different areas. This parcel is very highly graded. So there is a something like a 40-foot, is it 40 feet now? 40 foot, there would be a 40-foot change in elevation from one side of the building to the other side of the building. So you can imagine, something in the range of, 4 times the height of this room as you move from one side of the building to another. And that doesn't include, as you get further away from the facility, you're going to have changes in elevation for parking lots. So it would be a very steep incline, all on solid bedrock. So it would be a lot of blasting. The bedrock is visible. We've in conversation with the developer, they've done some exploration and have noted that a good portion of the site is bedrock. So that was another element of consideration as we talked about development cost. None of this is insurmountable, but it would add to the cost of construction quite significantly and potentially the timeline. So I'll pause there maybe for any questions before we get to the last part of it.
Sure. And just a reminder for board members, so we will discuss the vote when we get to new business, but if you have questions for about the presentation or anything that you've seen so far, that now is the time to ask Dina.
Yeah, and what's on the screen right now is just a summary of a lot of what I've talked about. Essentially, it's pretty easy to see from the green. The site that comes out ahead of all of the others is Scarborough Downs for all the reasons that I just discussed, and there are more beyond that, but certainly that's our recommendation is just based on everything that we are seeing, and I think the diligence that we put into the entire team put into everything. Scarborough Downs is by far and away I think the site that's the most favorable for developing this school.
Are there any questions for Dana?
I had one. I don't want to rehash old business. I think this board previously voted or made a decision to move forward with a unified site. But this is post that process, but as part of your process, you also did consider the existing sites with the addition of a 4th primary school to accommodate as a base. But when you made that decision, your recommendation to this board was the unified site, and so you move forward with that. It's not that you didn't look at that possibility.
No, that's a good question. So I mean the 4th school option is one that becomes very problematic from a number of different perspectives. First and foremost, would be the absolute most costly thing the town could do. You have to renovate 3 existing schools. Those 3 existing schools are nowhere near big enough to accept the programs that would go into them. And we're revising a business case that will show this information very succinctly. But there's a couple of important points. One is that the parcels that each of the schools sit on are not large enough to accommodate a program in any form that would, that would make it sense, that would make it, an obvious decision to renovate the existing schools. You still have to build a fourth school to accommodate that program, no matter what. So, and that school has to be large enough to accept the children or the programs from each of those schools during a 1-year period while they're renovated. So now you're taking the program from that school and you're putting it in a fourth school just so you can renovate another school. So it becomes, again, very costly and a very long drawn out process. That process will not, when you look at the enrollment projections, the recently and even the previous ones, the schedule doesn't work with the enrollment that we're going to see. We're going to run out of room before we finish the project. So again, more to come on that. We've got the business case that's going to be coming out and be updated. We posted on the website. This information will be on the website, updated FAQ on the website. I highly encourage people to go spend some time and look at the information. The group's done a lot of work to put information on the website. We've had a lot of folks that are concerned with the project, and we can put the information out there, but folks got to read it. So encourage you to do that. Reach out to us if you have questions. We will do our best to answer them.
Are there any other questions for Jeff right now?
I just wanted to add one thing. The Foley site, we had the gentleman come on Tuesday with a very, very enthusiastic message that under no uncertain terms would a school be going on that site. So.
Yep. Good call out,
that-
Jillian. Absolutely. Yeah. We had reached out to the property owners who happen to be, I think, this gentleman's parents. And he, very, willingly showed up and said, "Hey, it's not going to happen." So it was great. So it was good. It was good to get some closure on that one after all the phone tag we tried to get going. But yeah, so thanks for mentioning that.
I have a quick question. I think it's a quick question. When you were talking about like the existing, you building a fourth school and the three primary schools that exist and renovating them, about not being able to offer the same programming. So are you saying that with the fourth new school that we would be building, it would have programming, updated programming offerings that the three schools couldn't offer because of their size? Or what did you?
Yeah. So
can you clarify that a little bit more?
there's two, I guess there's kind of two things that have been, one of them is what we're considering, right? That we build a unified school. The other is, I even hate calling it an option because it's not really an option that should even be considered, but we'll talk about
I
it.
agree with you. I'm just.
Yeah, no, I want to clarify. That's good. It's a good question. We would have to build a fourth school and keep the three existing and renovate them. So when you look at the three existing schools, we have portables on them now. We've consumed a large portion of the apron space around the schools for things like additional parking, all the trailers that we have that kids go to school in. And by consuming that apron space, we're consuming other things like playground space, buffer space with the neighbors, space for things like stormwater ponds that we would need if we were to, do something with those schools. So if you're really going to be relegated to the existing footprint, maybe a little tiny expansion, we can't put a second floor. The buildings won't support a second floor. Where that leaves you with the existing schools is you're relegated to almost what you started with, like what was built in 1950, right? So you can't make the rooms bigger. You're going to be kind of stuck with the layout that you have. And oh, by the way, whatever you had for portables, now you don't. So now you squash down. So maybe you're looking at, a kindergarten school, maybe a first grade. You won't fit second grade. That's going to have to be in the fourth school. So it really becomes kind of quite difficult to to provide enough space for just basic classroom space. But then when you talk about all the extra, all the other programs, special education, music, art, gym space, play space, storage space, you're still stuck with all the same problems you had before. So it really doesn't make sense. And again, can't emphasize enough, long drawn out timeline, 12 plus years. Okay. So when you look at that and then you look at this thing called inflation, I don't know if anybody's noticed that lately. That isn't going to slow down. So for every year that we delay a project, or for every year we have a future construction project, you're going to be paying that over and over and over again. Welcome. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and just to add on to that a little bit, when you look at when you talk about programming and that the schools offer, and you look at the what's called a massing diagram, which is essentially what he showed us, which is the land, essentially the photo of the land. When you look at the massing diagrams for the 3 current schools and the way that the property that we have, when you start adding things in like having a bus loop and having a dedicated parent drop-off space, the space for that school that Dana's talking about that we currently have actually shrinks down even smaller. And then you're now talking about building a building on a smaller space and trying to fit in programming like a separate cafeteria and a separate gym. And for anybody who is familiar with our current schools, those happen right now in one place, right? So when you start doing that, that's to Dana's point, there's just not the space to create all of those spaces.
Yeah.
Right, to have the programming that we would.
One other thing that's important to mention too is that with renovating, any kind of renovation, we're going to be touching in each one of the existing schools, we would be touching enough to require us to bring the entire facility up to today's code standards. And I think that includes things like fire and egress, sprinkler systems, fire mitigation, so fire doors and things like that. In an existing facility that was built 1940s, 1950s, and get really, really costly. And it can become something that consumes more space that you don't have. So you say, okay, well, now we have to have room for a fire door. Well, where you put the fire door? Is fire door has to go into a classroom. Well, now you're going to lose part of a classroom. So these are things that will happen in these, if we were to pursue that path, it would be, it's definitely something that would become very difficult to contend with.
Are there any other questions for Dana? Jenna, you?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, from like a child development standpoint, if you were to update these existing schools, it would also require us to disrupt the school day for our kids. And then also you would have to pay more for our contractors to come on site after school hours, which just tacks on more money to the project itself.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Jenna.
If I could just kind of shine some light on a couple of things, because I don't think everybody, if they're out in the public, understands Dana's background, which I've learned a lot about what you do professionally. And I think that it gives a lot of validity to you sitting in this chair position. And I think it has really given us a lot of confidence in your guidance, which, I mean, we can't thank you enough. Oh my God, the amount of hours you've put in.
Thank you.
So I mean, along with Al and Lisa as well. So sitting on the committee, I have learned a ton from all of you, but this is as great of a presentation as this is really just the cliff notes. We have gone in so thoroughly and so much in depth over the last couple months, and even more before I even got on the board, that I've learned about as well. So I really encourage people to go back and look, even our most recent meeting where we voted in support to bring the Downs to now the school board to have that vote. There was a lot of really good, robust discussion, and there were a lot of good points brought up that, the Downs wasn't something that was predetermined. And we discussed that. So not to drag this meeting on, but I do think it's very important for anybody in the public who might be hearing those things, also didn't go listen or didn't attend our most recent building committee meeting, you know, it's online. I would encourage you to go take a peek at it because you'll get a lot of those questions that you have answered. And similar to what Dana said, we are putting together that frequently asked questions. So pretty much anything anybody's asking us, we're going to put on there in a pretty organized fashion. So I feel, as somebody who's been sitting and very involved in this, I feel very confident in the decision that we're making. And I feel very confident in the fact that Dana's leading us, and we have Al and Lisa and their expertise too. So, I mean, for me, you know, I think I could probably speak for everybody, but we really appreciate all three of your, you know, your input and definitely your time.
Yeah, no, it's you know, everybody has, you know, done a tremendous amount here. I mean, we've had involvement from Tom, Hall, you know, John, you know, on the town council. Everybody has really done a nice job at making sure that the process was followed. We were thorough, everything was considered. And, you know, I always go back to the saying, you know, no one is smarter than all of us. And I think that's the case. That's the case with this. So it's been a good effort. If there are any questions, I'm certainly happy to answer any additional. Like I said, I think our recommendation is to, what we voted on the other night was the down site, and hopefully we've provided enough information here to make that decision making process easy for everybody.
I just want to say, thank you very much to you and to the entire building committee. It's not lost on any of us that you are volunteers and that this is a huge lift, and it has been a huge lift for many, many years, not just a few months, not just a couple weeks, not just a couple hours, but for years. And we all greatly appreciate your work, everybody on the committee. We have staff members that work all day, just like the rest of our volunteers, and then stay and continue on working through this. And some of these meetings have gone well into the evening. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. This is really good. And we, like Brian said, I have the utmost confidence in the recommendation that you're bringing forward, and we appreciate you providing this additional information for us.
No, thank you, and thank the team.
All right. 9.0 is new business. So 9.1 is the motion to approve the Scarborough Public School Building Committee's site selection for the proposed new school. So do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All right. Any discussion? So now would be, if we have any questions about the site, about the process, now we can get into that if there's any.
I don't have any questions, but I, having sat through all of these meetings, or most of them with all of these brilliant people, I can tell you that I just want to really reiterate that there were hours that went into even just the littlest details on these properties. It was nothing was taken lightly. I honestly did not. I didn't know where we were going to arrive when we started this process, or even most of the way through it. People brought really great points about all of these sites throughout that. It seemed insurmountable at first, the number of sites, and then the few that popped up in between, and all the legwork that went into trying to find some of the landowners. I know all this was said at our last meeting, but it's really it's really quite something. There were many hours. So I'm really excited that we have arrived here finally. And I know the community has been anticipating this for a really long time. So I'm excited to get out there, and I'm certainly very excited to vote on this tonight.
Thank you, Jillian. Do you have a question? That's your question. Diane, really quick, would you mind pulling up slide 26?
Sure. 26?
26, please.
We're on 45.
Almost there. I just wanted to point out, and if you see the centroid and there, if you could just circle with your mouse. I just want to point out what this is. So when this was, again, this is the map of all of Scarborough that where Diane is circling, that is the centroid, the geographic centroid of town. So when you're looking at this map and then you're looking at the concentric rings outside, each of those rings, those red rings are a mile from the centroid. So when the building steering committee and then the community at the different forums were asked where they want this property, that's how you're trying to look. That's what you're looking in relation to. So the Downs location essentially is right there where Diane's circling that blue spot. So very close to the centroid of town. So when we start talking about bus rides, Scarborough is very, very large. And as it stands right now, we have some students that are riding the bus for upwards up to an hour. And so when we talk about really making sure that the bus rides are equivalent across town, making sure we have access to sewer, water, utilities, making sure that this is in close proximity to everybody and can handle the traffic. That is where this site really kind of rose to the top in my mind, I would say.
I was not all that attuned to what the building committee had been doing before joining the board, and obviously I'm fairly new to this process. But having been here and been educated by all the work the committee has done, it's really impressed upon me sort of the dedication and the time that took going into this. I don't, there's a lot of noise about town because there's noise in every town. And we're no exception. But there's a lot of discussion about, the downs and sort of feelings about the downs. And I really would like to pull this process out of any feelings towards the downs in general. I think that's inappropriate, especially in light of sort of the amount of work that went into site selection and the fact that it wasn't predetermined. And if it was, there was a heck of a lot of work wasted on 46, whittling down to 4 other sites that took years to do, that would not have been done if there was some sort of predetermined outcome. So I think that is just a myth that's evolved that I think should be dispelled. And I think the work on the website clearly demonstrates that. And so I don't want to rehash the 4 schools versus 1 school, but that is something else that I hear a lot about, which is the 4 school versus the 1 school. And this idea that sort of, we haven't put that to bed. I think it has been put to bed. That also is in the website on all the materials. It's extremely clear in the analysis why it's impossible to do 4 schools and to keep the existing primary schools as much as, my children go there and there is an emotional attachment to the schools where your children grow up in. And I definitely feel that, but those feelings can't come in, can't be borne at the cost of the next 12 years of children moving through our school district. And so I think it's really critically clear for folks who are hopefully paying attention, if they have strong opinions, to look at the information that's been provided to us, because it really does answer all the whys and how comes that I think are hanging people up.
Thank you, Freyla.
And I would just to tag along with that, I think any of us who sit on the building steering committee would be more than happy if people have questions about that. And maybe they don't have that actual time to go digging through the years worth of data that's on there. I think we're all pretty well educated to be able to sit down and we have actually, a couple of us have individually sat down with people in the community. So we're more than happy to do that. But you bring up a good point because a lot of that has been addressed. It is out there, it's public. There's evidence to support it or data that backs it up. There's numbers that support it. And so I think I'm glad that you brought that up. The fact about if people thought the Downs was predetermined was also addressed at our last meeting. And I don't want to speak for John Anderson, but I would recommend everybody go back to that last meeting because I think he made a good comment talking about, there's something to the effect of when the Downs came into Scarborough, the big concern of a lot of people was how is this big, massive, installment of kind of a community within a community going to fit and bring us together. And this could really, it seems like this could be a great way to create that natural, organic community. because now we can have a school potentially within the Downs where we would potentially have a town center too, that looks like it's breaking ground this summer. So a lot of positives to this that I think we weren't necessarily even thinking about in advance, that as we started seeing the puzzle pieces come together as a committee, I think we started seeing some of those true benefits, that it's not just about just the students, but even the community is really going to get some good benefits out of this. And I think that's our goal, right? A lot of our work is kind of just starting now that we've gotten to this point, but I think that's our goal now, is to educate everybody as to why should you support this? Because we support this now. Let's make sure you understand how you also benefit from this, because there are benefits to the community, even if you don't have kids.
To follow up briefly on that, I also have served on committees, not on this committee, but other committees. And I think this board has delegated a lot of the work to that committee. And the fact that they've unanimously come back with this recommendation speaks volumes to me. From what the information I see, I don't see any choice other than supporting this. So I'm very happy to support it. But I also want to say that we also have to put trust in our community members when they come together, and they put a lot of time and effort, and they are very clear and transparent in the process and the information that they relied on. And so we have to rely on the people that we delegate that to. So that as well.
Absolutely. All right, if there are no other questions, we will call the vote, please.
Sure. Mrs. Gammon,
1000% yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Very enthusiastically, yes.
Mr. Mayorino,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Bertulia, and Mr. Shumway.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It's unanimous and it passes. Thank you. All right, 9.2 is the first reading of policy ACR, which is a grievance procedure for persons with disabilities. So for this, I'll turn it over to Freyla.
Yeah, I don't blame anybody leaving. We have a lot of really intense policy work, so buckle your seatbelts. So the policy committee met, and we were able to go over a number of policies which are being presented today. I mean, the first 5, I believe, I'm counting correctly. Yeah, the first 5 are required policies that are required by law. And I'm not going to read them to you, even though I was afraid for a minute I might have to, and they would all go to sleep if I did that. There's a federal procurement policy as part of this extravaganza. Yeah, so I'm going to go through them overall and then ask for any questions. And then I'm going to talk about the differences between the policies that were the policy committee is recommending and the draft policy that was given to us by Drummond Woodsum. They're very minor, but I will go over them. So I'm starting, trying to look at make sure the agenda lines up with my email. Policy ACR, which is the grievance procedure for persons with disability. That would be policy number AC-R. And I do have them all open on my computer, so just give me a second. We made a very slight change in the second paragraph to make a should be a shall. I think you're going to see a theme with our committee making permissive language stronger. We made that second change of a shall from a should at the last, the second to last paragraph as well. But other than that, it's the same as the required, the policy that was recommended as the model policy. This policy is a requirement so that we come into compliance with federal law. So it's not a lot of options or it wasn't a lot of work to be done, but I would be happy to answer any questions about it. I did have one question in the policy committee meeting having to do with why it was limited to, it's a procedure of grievances for individuals who have physical disabilities. And if there's a structural change to a building that needs to be made, it needs to come before this board. And why it was limited, I think we decided that was likely because structural requires a lot of financing, which would require a lot of other work to be done. But ultimately, we didn't make any changes. But I hope you all had an enjoyable time reading this policy. Any questions? Okay.
All right. So do I have a motion to approve the first reading of policy ACR, the grievance procedure for persons with disabilities?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, can call the vote, please.
Mrs. Gammon,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Mayorino,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Bertulia, and Mr. Shumway.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, 9.3 is the first reading of policy DJR, which is the Federal Procurement Manual for School Units.
This is the one you're very happy that I'm not reading out loud to you. It's 16 pages. There's one change we made. We changed pronouns, which said his or her to their, just for brevity. Not that there's a lot of brevity in this policy. But this, this policy has a brief overview, but this just brings us into compliance with federal grant, essentially grants, and allows us to, we have to go along with federal policy in order to be entitled to grants. And this is the procurement policy that we have to be entitled to federal grants, and we all want our federal grant money. So that's why the policy committee supports this.
Are there any questions for Freyla? All right, can you call the vote, please?
Mrs. Gammon,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Miss Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor Reno,
Yes.
Ms. Turpinian,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff.
We have a motion.
Yeah, I don't think we have a
Oh.
motion.
Thank you.
There's never a motion to,
Before we
You asked
discuss?
for a vote. That's
Yeah.
correct. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you for that, John. I apologize. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the first reading of policy DJR, the Federal Procurement Manual for School Units?
so moved.
Second.
My goodness, thank you very much. Okay, can we call the roll, please, the vote, please now?
Do you want to clarify that there's no more
Oh, yeah,
discussion?
is there any more discussion? I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, we're
Mrs.
ready.
Gammon,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Miss Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor Reno,
Yes.
Ms. Turpinian.
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Bertulia, and Mr. Shumway.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you, and I apologize again. Agenda item 9.4 is the first reading of policy EBCA, the Comprehensive Health and Safety and Emergency Management Plan.
All right, so this policy, we did make a couple of changes, but nothing substantive. We changed the wills to shalls in a couple of places. That would have been in the very first line of it. And then we put in Scarborough School District where appropriate instead of the generic name, school unit name. Ultimately, this is a statutory policy. It's in your beautiful orange book. I have it flagged if anyone wants to read it, but it is laid out in 28 MRS 1001 subsection 16. This is mandatory. The policy is mandatory. The language is mandatory. So.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the first reading of policy EBCA, the Comprehensive Health and Safety and Emergency Management Plan?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Just had a quick question.
Yeah.
On, in the third paragraph, does that mean that the superintendent, do I call you superintendent or can I just say Jeff? Well, the superintendent will submit a plan, so does that mean we'll be getting a plan to review?
Yes, so
Okay.
what we did was we actually discussed within the policy, we have that binder that we made for you when you first came on, and in that binder is a yearly calendar of the things we have to do. So this has now been added to that. So Diane suggested September would be a good month to review that because that's when the school year is starting and when this seems an appropriate time for us to review this annually.
But as one point of clarity, we would not be providing a detailed copy of that emergency management
Mhm.
plan because that is a confidential plan because of the nature of the topic.
Also, just, I'm not, if you care, what was shared with us is that we actually largely already have a plan.
We do.
So we actually are in compliance with the law. We just don't have the policy to go with it.
Correct.
Yeah, and I would just add the timing of that review is good because there's some significant changes this past year. In terms of the plan and then also some additional technology and procedures that we have in place this year.
Thank you, Carolyn. I'm having a slight moment. We did take a motion already, yes? Okay, thank you. Now I'm scared. All right, can we call the vote, please? I'm so sorry.
Mrs. Gammon,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor Reno,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff.
Here.
Ms.
Yes.
Ms. Bertulia, and Mr. Shumway.
Yes.
The wheels have come off the bus completely.
Again.
All right. Agenda item 9.5 is the first reading of policy GBN, the family and medical leave, Emma.
Yeah, maybe a good place to go. FMLA leave. This again is statutory. It makes two changes that are effective. Maine made two changes. One's effective became effective in October 2021. One became effective August of 2022. Has to do with effective dates of statutes. This brings us into compliance with the definitions of which includes new members to the family category, grandchildren, domestic partners, grandchildren. And it also extends benefits to folks who work at the school for at least 900 hours in the previous 12 months, which enlarges the group entitled to it. But though, again, those are both statutory changes.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the first reading of policy GBN, family and medical leave?
Who moved?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, can we call the vote?
Mrs. Gammon,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Mayorino,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Bertulia,
Yes.
and Mr. Shumway.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. 9.6 is the first reading of policy GCFBR, which is the recruiting and hiring of administrative staff, administrative procedure.
So for this policy, we did make one substantive change, which is previously we were required, the policy required that we advertise in print media for job postings, which is something that's no longer done based on expense and lack of response. We use the internet. It's an amazing device. So this, we edited it to just made it vaguer so that the appropriate parties in HR can decide where to place the advertisement in appropriate media instead of directing it to be printed. But that's the only change. Other than that, this is not a statutory law. However, this is a procedure that would be required to make sure that we are in compliance with all the hiring practices that will keep us out of trouble.
Perfect. Do I have a motion to approve the first reading of policy GCFBR, the recruiting and hiring of administrative staff, administrative procedure?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right,
Mrs. Gammon,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Here, yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
yes.
Mr. Mayorino,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Bertulia,
Yes.
and Mr. Shumway.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna bundle 9.7 and 9.8 because those are the two that go together. So this is the second reading of policy ACAAA, the transgender and gender expansive students, and the second reading of policy ACAAAE, transgender student support plan. So I'm going to turn over to Freyla to talk through the changes that were suggested and what the policy committee decided.
Sure. So the policy committee went through, we had additional public comment, we had additional comment through email. We've obviously been addressed by folks at all of our meetings here. And we have tried to respond to all those in our meeting, sort of going back through. So we went back through the policy pretty much line by line again. It was more quick this time, which was good because I think it took us 5 meetings to get through the entire policy. So looking at the changes that we made, we changed all the kind of permissive, and this has been spoken to, shoulds, woulds to be consistently shall. And we have this great function on our computers that allowed us to search for all the words and change them to shall, which was very helpful. But we think we caught them all. And so that was one of the biggest changes that's throughout the document. I'm not going to list every one of them. Other than that, we considered, we added at our last, when the first reading, when we had the attorney, I think she's Melissa Huey here to address us, she helped craft some language at the beginning, which really helped set the tone for the policy, which is that I view this policy as an invitation or a calling in to all the members around a student whose policy this is affected by this policy and who needs to use this policy. And so we added at the end of the last sentence in the kind of purpose statement is that the administrators and school staff are expected to consider the needs of students on a case-by-case basis, work in partnership with parents and or guardians, and to follow this policy and other available resources as appropriate. And so we made that change in response to commentary to just make sure that we really from the outset ensure that I really see this as again as a call in for parents and families in the school to work together. This policy is intended, it does not take the place of a parent-child relationship. It's not intended to do that. What it is intended to do is to, when there's an identifiable issue at school that's identified by a parent, a student, or a staff member, teacher, guidance counselor, building administrator, somebody involved with that student's life, and they identify an issue, that issue, and the individual believes that there is support needed for that student, any of those individuals can then start this process, which would then address the student's needs. And that's really the whole purpose of this policy. And I think in some of the discussions for people who are against this policy and who are for this policy sort of are enlarging it to sort of take the place or sort of eclipse a parent-child relationship or interfere or how people are raising children or make it very large. And I want to be really clear that this policy is really intended for a very discrete moment at school, where somebody at school, the student, a parent, a teacher, another staff member identifies that there is an issue going on. That could be bullying, it could be harassing, it could be a mental health issue being suffered by a student based on, their internal thought process and worries that they have. It could be something that comes up in the classroom, but if there's an issue, it needs to be addressed by the school. And so this is the school's process to address those issues. So with that, I think, I hope everyone's had an opportunity to review it. It is not substantively different than the one we looked at the first reading, except for those changes that I mentioned. I don't think we made any changes. We did make one change to the form. This is a form that's been in, I want to be clear, there is also already a policy. And in fact, this would change that policy. As part of the process that's currently ongoing in the school, Scarborough actually created a really great document, a confidential student gender support plan that helps guide the meetings that are currently occurring. And we sort of brought that document, which whoever created it and whatever thought process went into it was really good. That was great work. It gave us a really good place to sort of move this document. We just brought it into alignment with the policy. And we changed the woulds to shalls. We tried to make it a little brief. So we had some duplications of parts of it where we had two lists of attendees and roles, tried to collapse it to make it a little bit easier. Again, you don't want the form to make meetings more complicated. You want the form to just document what the meeting was about. And then when we talk about names, which is something that I suspect would be an issue in some of these meetings, one of the boxes is a dialogue, and it's how will a teacher or staff member respond to questions about a student's gender from other students, staff, parents and guardians, and community. And we separated out the parents and guardians and the community. And I think this is important because I think it's really important to memorialize an agreement so that everybody's on the same page about how somebody is referred to. And if that person has different, is currently using different identities in different places in their lives, that everybody is aware of that, so we can honor and respect and make sure that we are supporting that student in a manner that is beneficial to them. And it also talks about how will teachers and staff, and I think how students will refer to themselves. And that I think is important to make sure that that is specifically discussed. So there's no accidents or assumptions that create unintended consequences. And I think that, sometimes these boxes feel a little bit odd, or if it's a situation you haven't encountered, seems to be really enlarged. But I think it really is important that this document really goes through the school aspect of what happens in schools. And I really want to compliment whoever created this form and really went into detail about sports and facilities and everything. The document is really clear, and I think clarity is the best protection we can give students, is that everyone knows what to expect. So that was sort of the policy committee's main discussion and focus around this policy.
Thank you. Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the second reading of policy ACAAA, transgender and gender expansive students, and approve the second reading of policy ACAAE, the transgender student support plan?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I just want to, oh, go ahead.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to add that I think it speaks volumes of everyone that made public comment on this policy. I think it indicates that the policy is not about the parent-child dynamic, but about how we are going to support this within our schools. So, you know, been reading this policy over and over again, I think it actually is very detailed, and it really focuses on how we can make this experience a better experience for our children.
Thank you, Jenna. Kelly?
And so I just wanted to first say thank you to the policy team for, listening to feedback and incorporating it where they felt it was best. And so that is very much appreciated. I'll still abstain tonight because of a couple issues that we talked about the last time, but I'm definitely not going to vote no. But I just wanted to let you know that I do appreciate your work and your efforts.
Thank you, Carolyn.
I also, very similar to what Jenna was saying, I think having that family piece was important to me, and having it emphasized and making it just clear. And so I do think that this helps. And obviously we had some help from our attorney to come up with the lingo there. Again, I do wish that the students had stayed so that they could actually see some of this and some of their work come to fruition. I would say that Carolyn and I had noticed something that I thought was interesting, and I just asked the students, there are different forms of protest that are out there. And we had picked up on the fact that when we did the pledge, that all of the students who spoke decided to sit. And I thought that was kind of interesting. It's not something personally I believe in or I agree with. So I just asked them, to consider, why do you actually choose to protest in that way? Because it came off as a protest to me, and Carolyn and I kind of looked at each other. To me, I look at it differently, and I don't view it as being connected to this policy. And I feel like this board has been very respectful of the students who came and spoke here both last time and this time. And so I don't want to say that I found it disrespectful, but in a way, I didn't find it right. Just because I think saying the pledge is something that we've done for years and years in a school. And so I don't understand if it was a part of protest. I wish they had mentioned what the deal was with that. But, and they're welcome to email us and kind of clarify for that. That's fine too. I welcome that, just to be educated as to where that came from. But I think it's important. And when I used to teach, there were some students that literally out of laziness wouldn't stand up. And I said, guys, let's talk about where the pledge comes from. Like, what's the importance of it? And certain students would talk about that. I don't teach anymore, but I think that it's important that students think about, if they're going to protest and they're going to sit for something that has been a tradition in our schools for a really, really, really long time, think about why you're choosing to do that. And I just don't know that this was the right place for that. So.
Thank you, Brian. Any other?
I just wanted to respond to Brian. Interestingly, I didn't quite pick up on it, and maybe I just didn't feel like it was a protest, and I felt that the students that came were merely there to just support this policy that was there. And maybe some of them, this was a new experience to come to a board meeting, focusing on their bravery and courage to stand up at the podium and speak, and really not focusing on the traditional aspect of standing up for this moment. So I guess, it's kind of off topic for this policy tonight. I think we just need to vote on the policy, but we can kind of talk more and explore if this was a protest, we can kind of talk with you on like, how can we make this a better experience for you so that we're all together on this.
Thank you, Jenna. I just have just a quick follow-up on the clarity piece and how the clarity of the policies help our students and ensure that they know exactly what to expect. I think this also is helpful for our staff so that they have very clear guidance on what they can expect and how they can help to create this safe environment for our students as well. So I think likely it's, we've heard from the students, but I would likely think from the staff and administration as well, that this is helpful to just create a sense of understanding across the board. So. All right, if there's no more comments, I will ask the call to vote, please.
Mrs. Gammon,
Abstain.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Miss Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Mayorino,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Ms. Trapani Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Bertulia,
Yes.
and Mr. Shumway.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Agenda item 9.9 are the meeting minutes of April 6, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay.
Mrs. Gammon,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Miss Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Mayorino,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Ms. Trapani Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Bertulia,
Yeah.
and Mr. Shumway.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Agenda item 9.10 is appointments, and 9.10.1 is the middle school spring coach.
8th grade softball.
Oh,
Mr. Matt Link,
exciting.
head coach.
That's very exciting. All right, do I have a motion to approve the middle school spring coach as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, we call the roll, please.
Mrs. Gammon,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Miss Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Mayorino,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Ms. Trapani Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Bertulia,
Yeah.
and Mr. Shumway.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Agenda item 10.0 is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All right. we'll call the roll.
Mrs. Gammon,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Miss Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Mayorino,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Ms. Trapani Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Bertulia,
Yes.
and Mr.